What's happening, everyone? So the other day, the smash hit HBO series The Penguin came to its epic conclusion, and honestly, I loved the show. There isn't really anything I can think that I would want to change about it. I love the acting, casting, directing, story. Hell, I even loved the outfits of the show. I just think everything about the show worked so well. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. There are millions of people around the world, including you, who've probably seen the show, that know The Penguin is great and can probably articulate why it's great better than I can. So what I want to talk about today is something extremely specific about The Penguin, something that I personally loved about the show that I haven't really seen many other people really talking about. That doesn't mean they aren't, that just means I haven't seen it. The internet is vast, and I can't see everything, alright? It's impossible. But what I specifically want to talk about is the fact that this show changes the audience's perspective on the Penguin himself, on Oswald Cobb, throughout the course of the show for a very specific reason and in a very unique way that I very much approved of. You see, throughout the course of the Penguin, Oz kind of goes through three different forms. He goes from a villain and generalized bad guy to the hero of the show to a devil that we want to put 6 feet underground. And the reason the show has to do this is because Oz is not the main character. Well, he's obviously the main character of the Penguin, but Oz is not the main character of his universe. That's the Batman. Oz is one of the Batman's villains, and although we are taking a little spin-off side story from the Batman story and fleshing out Oz specifically, at the end of the day, he's going to end up being one of the antagonists of the Batman. And they have to kind of tread a very thin line with this show where they have to get us on the side of Oz while also making sure the show ends with us wanting him to get beaten by the Batman. Because this show could go the route of other shows that focus on antagonists as the protagonist, such as like Death Note or Dexter, where they have them do acts of good deeds, kind of. Where we, as audience members, are self-aware that serial killers are bad and shouldn't exist, but in regards to Death Note and Dexter, they kill bad people with their unique skills and abilities, and that kind of puts us on their side and gives us a bit of perspective and allows us to follow them through their story and everything that they go through. But you can't really do that here with the Penguin, because if you give him a moral standpoint to have, if you give him that high ground, then when he faces off against the Batman, you're going to end up with a situation where you're just like, well, I don't want Batman to beat Oz because I like Oz. I spent an entire show bonding with him and seeing him fight through to get his status as the King of Gotham. I don't want him to lose to Batman. And then there will be people who are rooting against Batman, which you don't want to happen. But then in other things, like other mob-related media similar to the Penguin, it doesn't work in those aspects as well, because although those characters are just bad from jump and everyone knows this, there are people rooting against those characters in those shows, which isn't something you really want to have happen with the Penguin. Because I can guarantee you, spoilers for The Sopranos ahead, but in The Sopranos, I guarantee you there wasn't a single person watching that show that wanted Tony to kill Chris and Adriana. You could see that it was coming due to the fact that Chris was addicted to drugs and Adriana was roped into being an undercover agent for the feds, but you didn't want them to be killed by him. You wanted them to escape, but that ended up not happening, and Tony found out about all the crazy crap that they were up to, and he killed both of them. No one wanted Tony to win there. Everybody wanted him to lose. You don't really want that to happen with the Penguin either, because you want to root for him in this show and see him become the Penguin, the King of Gotham. So the show has to tread this very thin line, this very tight-knit balancing act to make you enjoy Penguin as the protagonist of the Penguin, but then end it off with him being a villain worthy of being beat down by the Batman, and I think they execute that flawlessly. So, with all that being said, sit down, relax, and get prepared to talk about... So the first stage that we meet Oz in within the show, the Penguin, is as a villain. Everyone going into this show has a preconceived notion of the Penguin being the bad guy. Either you're a fan of Batman in general and you're aware that the Penguin is one of Batman's rogues gallery, or you were someone who saw the Penguin and then came into this show knowing about Colin Farrell's performance in the movie The Batman, where he was originally introduced. And either way you look at it, it's perfectly fine because you understand that the Penguin isn't exactly the best kind of guy. But now you run into that first problem. If you know the Penguin is a bad guy, how do you get us on his side without making him seem like a good guy and without just making him a bad guy that everyone's just going to root against the entire show. How do you shift this villain into the hero and protagonist of this story? And they do something that I was not really surprised about. Well, wrong. I meant to say they did something that I was very surprised about. They related us to Oz. They made Oz the everyman. The show immediately starts off getting you invested to his character, and it continues to do this throughout the course of the show, putting you more on his side. The show opens up with Oz at the, if I'm not mistaken, it was the Iceberg Lounge, specifically Carmine Falcone's office in said Iceberg Lounge. And while he was there, he ran into Carmine's son, Alberto Falcone. And the two of them got into a conversation where Oz told Alberto about what he wants to be in his life. He told him his dream about how when he grew up as a kid, there was this gangster named Rex Calabrese who ran his neighborhood and protected everybody in the neighborhood, and everyone looked up to him and worshipped him. He's telling him this because that's what Oz wants for himself. He wants to become this kind of gangster, a gangster that looks after the little guy. And Alberto laughed in his face. He thought his dream was stupid and pathetic and laughed his ass off in front of him, and this grinds Oz's gears to the point that he kills Alberto right there on the spot. But although that may be shocking, I don't think anyone really had a problem with Oz doing this, because most people in the world can relate to being made fun of, and especially they can relate to having people undermine their potential at achieving their dreams. Hell, there might be people out there now that have this issue who are trying to achieve their goals as we speak. And that just resonates with the everyman. Everyone can understand what those feelings are like. Everyone has had a dream that they've wanted to achieve, has been insulted by someone. So seeing this happen to Oz kind of brings you over to his side. And although most of us probably haven't killed someone over this, you can understand why Oz did it, and you're not like, you probably shouldn't have done that. You don't really feel that way. You're kind of like, he kind of deserved it because he was a jerk, and I'm completely on your side here. But it's still not enough. That's not enough to pull him into being the hero of the story. That's enough to start easing you down that road, but we still haven't fully got over to that point. But the next thing that hooks us in and actually brings us over to viewing Oz as kind of the hero of the story is Victor. Victor is a street kid from Gotham who was orphaned due to the Riddler's actions in the Batman Part 1, and he meets up with Oz, and Oz has this moment where he resonates with Victor because the two of them are basically one and the same. Oz was a street kid that grew up in Gotham who was very poor, that was discriminated against because he had a disability. He was made fun of and bullied, but he managed to carve out his way in the world and worked it up to where he currently is in society. And Victor is also a street kid who grew up in Gotham that was very poor and also has a disability. However, Victor's isn't a leg problem, he has a speech impediment issue. He stutters a lot and it's hard for him to get his words out whenever he's talking. And Oz kind of identifies with Victor in this moment when they first meet. Victor trying to boost the tires off of Oz's expensive car, which is, not exactly the most optimal meeting, but that's exactly how they met each other, and it allowed Oz to see himself in Victor. So instead of killing Victor, he offers Victor a chance to become a part of his organization. And the two of them start working together throughout the course of the show for Oz to become the king of Gotham. And the longer they spend time with each other, the more they work together, they start to bond and become like a family. And the two of them become really close and really good friends, and this results in Oz being humanized. We see that Oz, although he's trying to become the criminal kingpin of Gotham, he's kind of just a guy who's trying to carve out a better life for himself and the people around him, and I feel like many people can relate to that, especially if you come from big families. So seeing Oz go through this and seeing him share parts of his life that he's hidden from the entire world with Victor, that being that his mother, Frances, is very much alive and not dead. He had faked his mother's death so that the mob wouldn't be able to use her against him, but he told Vic that his mom's alive. He shared with him that his brothers had passed away. He shared the fact that his mother has dementia, and this humanizes Oz to a point that we kind of stop seeing him as the bad guy and we see him as the hero, as the protagonist of the story, and we start rooting for him to succeed. We want him to become the kingpin of Gotham because we're on the same page as to the gripes and horrors of things that he has to deal with in his life, and we want him to succeed and make those things better. and I absolutely love the way the show goes about doing this. So regardless of who he's going up against in the show, whatever hardships he's facing, we want him to win in the end now because we relate to Oz and we can understand who he is as a person. But you can't just end the show that way because, like I mentioned earlier, Oz is not the protagonist of this universe. That's the Batman. So if the show ended with Oz being the hero, it wouldn't feel right because the audience would be split between rooting for Batman to break his face and Oz escaping because they have a connection to him. So we can't have the show end that way. So that leads into his next and final transformation, from hero to devil. See, Oz has to feel like a monster. He has to be the devil for us to be okay with Batman hitting him with the Vengeance Special. We need something to justify letting that happen without us hating Batman for doing so. And they do this with 3 key things. The first of which being Sophia Falcone. Sophia is basically the antagonist of the entirety of the Penguin. She is Carmine Falcone's daughter, who wants revenge against Oz because she blames him for getting herself arrested in Arkham Asylum. Because, well, he kind of had a big part in that. Oz ratted out what she was doing, talking to reporters, learning that her father, Carmine, was a serial killer, and this resulted in Carmine and the rest of the Falcone family getting her arrested, and she got locked up in Arkham Asylum for about a decade. And now that she's out, she wants revenge against her family and Oz for doing all of these horrible things to her, which is completely reasonable. Now, granted, Sophia is more like a tragic hero in the show rather than being an antagonist because at the end of the day, Oz is still a criminal and the bad guy, but Sophia, who would normally be the protagonist in any other instance, is the antagonist in this situation. But she's still against Oz, so he has to take care of her one way or another. And Oz, by the final and 8th episode of the show, finally comes up with a way to one-up Sophia, and he wins. And Sophia believes that she's going to die, that Oz is going to kill her, this is going to be the end of everything, and that's going to be a wrap. But no, Oz doesn't do that. Oz does the worst thing imaginable to Sophia, and he gets her locked up back in Arkham Asylum. You see, Oz wanted to get an in with the upper echelon of Gotham. He wanted to get into the politicians and the movers and shakers who run Gotham City. And the way he did that is that he cut a deal with one of the politicians saying that he would serve up Sophia Falcone on a platter and they could frame her for all the gang violence that had been going on in Gotham recently. And that would result in Oz being able to get an in with all of those people. So, when Oz caught Sophia, he very much made it seem like he was taking her out somewhere private so he could kill her, and then they would move on with everything. But, right as Oz appears to be about to shoot her, he disappears, and then the cops roll up and they take Sophia and throw her back in Arkham Asylum, which is absolutely despicable. Oz is very much aware what happened to Sophia in Arkham Asylum. He's seen throughout the course of the show how much it's destroyed her from what she used to be. Yet, at the end of the day, instead of killing her, which would have been merciful, he just throws her back in Arkham Asylum because it services his own needs. And that is just horrible. But we're not done yet. We still have 2 more things left that start to ease us over to seeing that Oz was never a person we should have rooted for in the first place. So now we move over to the biggest thing that most people are up in arms about, myself included, and that is the death of Victor. Oz, after defeating Sophia, he's won. Everything's over. He's the king of Gotham. Him and Vic did it. They are the kings. They rule the city. Everything's perfect. And in the first episode of the show, Vic and Oz end the episode by sitting down, eating some food together, and having a heart-to-heart conversation. And then in the final episode of the show, they are doing the same thing. They're sitting down somewhere, having a conversation with each other, and Oz is telling Vic about how they finally did it. They nailed it. They became the kings of Gotham. He's thanking Vic for everything that he's done for him, and the 2 of them are talking about how they view each other as family now after everything that they've been through. And then Oz reaches his arm around Victor and begins to strangle him. He tells Vic that he can't have family anymore. Family is a weakness. It's an attachment that allows people to get to him. It makes him vulnerable, and he can't have that anymore. So he has to kill Vic so that he doesn't have those attachments anymore. Despite the fact that Oz could not have become the king of Gotham without Vic. At the end of the show, Vic is the whole reason Oz was able to win. Oz lost everything. All the gangs in Gotham dipped out on him. He had none of his men. He had no drugs. Absolutely nothing. He was down to just himself and Vic. And Vic managed to convince all of the secondary leaders of every gang in Gotham to take out their bosses and side with Oz so that they could one-up Sophia and catch her off guard, allowing Oz to win. If it were not for Vic, none of this would have happened. Yet Oz doesn't care. He views Vic as a weakness because he actually likes him. He sees him as family, and he doesn't want to have any more family to be exploited against anymore. So he kills Vic, and what makes it worse, he doesn't just kill Vic. He steals Vic's ID from his wallet and tosses it out into Gotham River. That way, Vic is just a nameless, homeless nobody. He's just a corpse on the sidewalk that no one will know about and no one will care about. And just as like a little bit extra on there, he steals the money back that he paid Vic. Because Vic worked for Oz, and earlier on in the show, the two of them had a conversation about how Vic wanted to be paid for all the work he's doing for Oz, and Oz started paying him. So after he killed Vic, he opened up his wallet and stole the money that he paid Vic for all the services he did and pocketed it. And it's like, bro, you couldn't even let him die with the money you paid him, you scumbag. But we're still not done just yet. There is one final nail in this coffin that really pushes it over the edge to make you hate Oz, to make you see him as the devil that he truly is. And I know, right now, I'm sure you watching this video, you're like, nah, he killed Vic. This is already enough for me to hate him. And you're probably right. It wasn't enough for me as well, but the show said, nah, we gotta do a little bit more. We can't just leave it here. We just have to really hammer it in and make it certain that this is enough. Because there are people out there who probably wouldn't think it's so bad that he threw Sophia back in Arkham. There's a possibility of that because at the end of the day, they were both gangsters. They were both in the game, the criminal element, and criminals be doing criminals dirty. So maybe, in your eyes, Oz has only done one bad thing, that being killing Vic. So they need to make sure that there's one extra thing. There's at least two things that really hammer in how terrible of a person Oz is, and that is his mother, Frances. Frances has been depicted of having severe dementia throughout the entirety of the show. And by the end of the show, Frances ends up having a stroke that escalates her dementia, putting her in a vegetative state. Now, earlier on in the show, Oz and Frances had a conversation with one another, and Frances told Oz very clearly that if she ever loses her mind, if her dementia ever gets so bad she becomes a vegetable, she wants Oz to kill her. She does not want to live. She wants to go out with her pride and dignity intact. She does not want to be a vegetable. She doesn't want to lose herself. That is what she tells Oz. She is very strictly clear about this. But Oz has a sick obsession with his mother. He can't lose her. He's so attached to her, he just can't let her go. So, when his mother has the stroke and becomes a vegetable, he decides to keep her alive, going against her wishes. Instead, he puts her up in a penthouse apartment, which as a child, mind you, Oz did say he would get his mother a penthouse apartment that overlooked Gotham City and get her the finest, fanciest clothes and all that kind of glitz and glam. So, because he can't let her go and give her what she actually desires, he puts her up in the penthouse apartment where she overlooks Gotham. And the sickening part about this is as Frances is sitting there, incapable of doing anything, being a shell of who she used to be, Oz goes up to her and she starts crying because she's begging for death, because she doesn't want to be this way. And Oz has the audacity to look at his mother and tell her, I know, Ma, you're crying because you're happy because I got you everything that you wanted. No, Buster, you didn't. She wants to die. That's why she's crying right now. She's not crying because you got her the penthouse apartment that overlooks Gotham. She's crying because she's a literal vegetable. She's a shell of a human and she wants to die. That's why she's crying, but you've deluded yourself into this obsession that you can't lose your mother, that you would rather her be in pain and convince yourself that she's happy just so you don't have to let go of her. That's pure insanity. And just to add a little bit more, a little bit extra whipped cream, a little cherry on top, just to really set it in how horrible and messed up Oz is, how truly a devil this man is. After this moment with his mother, he walks out. Actually, hold on a second. I'm skipping ahead a bit. No, so yeah, let's start with the whipped cream before we go over to the cherry, right? So the whipped cream on top is that Oz, when he killed Vic, he told Vic he couldn't have family. He couldn't have any connections that could be exploited and used against him. Yet he kept his mother alive. So you're a hypocrite, because if your mom's alive, even if she's a vegetable, she could still be used against you as a weapon. Meaning, you didn't need to kill Vic because you still have family out here. So Vic could have just been fine. The two of you could have just been alive. You're a goddamn liar and a hypocrite, Oz. Fuck you. And then, the cherry on top. After Oz talks to his mother who's begging for death, he then goes into his living room where his girlfriend is waiting for him. And when this scene started, I thought that Oz was hallucinating, because Oz and his mother went out to a club when he was a kid, and his mother dressed up in a very fancy black dress, did her hair up, wore jewelry and everything, and they had a nice dance together. And I thought Oz was hallucinating this version of his mother when he walked down to the living room. And then I realized he's not hallucinating. That's an actual person. His girlfriend was there, and he had her dress up like his mother. Hair done the same way, jewelry the same exact dress, same makeup, and the two of them started dancing, and he was having her tell him that he's a good boy, that he's done everything right, he's gotten everything that she wanted, and that he's the king of Gotham, and this was just sickening. It was so disgusting and unhinged to watch this happen. I was sitting there just, I can't even describe like the level of shock and horror that I had as I was watching this unfold. And then, right then and there, I fully understood I should not have been on this guy's side. I fully understood that this show succeeded in its plan. It got me on board. It got me invested into the story of Oz, into the story of the Penguin, made me want him to become the king of Gotham. It shifted my opinion from, oh yeah, Penguin, he's just one of Batman's bad guys, we're getting a show about him, it'll probably be alright, to, you know what, I'm rooting for this guy, I'm on his side, I see what he's going for here, I'm on his side with him becoming the king of Gotham. To this ending, making me go, oh, I see, this was a mistake, this man should have died so long ago, so none of this could have happened. This man is the embodiment of evil. He truly is the devil himself, and I should have never rooted for him to succeed. But right then and there, while my blood is boiling, while my anger is incessant, while I can't handle looking at this man anymore, while I want to put him 6 feet underground, we get hit with one of the hypest moments that I have seen in so long.
Gotham's yours, sweetheart. Nothing's standing in your way now.
That bat signal hitting the sky was such a euphoric feeling for me. I cannot explain to you how happy it made me for that juxtaposition of there ain't nothing standing in your way, for that bat signal to hit the sky like, oh wait, did you forget that I'm here? The way I felt on the inside when that happened, I was ecstatic. I literally got up and you would imagine that my team won the Super Bowl in that moment. I was just up standing like, let's fucking go, dude. This is what I'm talking about. I need him to hit him with that vengeance special right now. That's how I was feeling in that moment, and it was just so flawless, because at that moment it made me realize how expertly this show played with my emotions. Oz as a character is very much a trickster. He's a schmoozer, he's a talker. He needs to get people on his side without you realizing it's going to screw you over in the end. And that's exactly what this show did. I bought into the bullshit that Oz was spitting out, and it pulled me over to his side until it was too late and everything fell apart and just absolutely destroyed me. So seeing the bat signal was absolutely phenomenal. And honestly, that is why I love the Penguin so much. That is my favorite aspect of this show that really hooked me in and made me fall in love with it in such great detail. There's like a million other things that I could talk about with it, but this is the number one thing that I absolutely loved about The Penguin. And I am so hyped that everyone loves the show, that most people, even people who haven't seen The Batman, have gone into this show kind of blind and fallen in love with it as well. I'm happy that it's just one of the greatest superhero shows. Well, not superhero, I guess like comic book is a better interpretation. Comic book shows that just exists, period. I'm so happy that this is the case, especially because Batman's my favorite character. So seeing one of his villains get treated with such love and respect is just really cool to me. But honestly, that's all I really have to say about The Penguin. I've gotten out all the emotions and feelings that I wanted to discuss about this topic. So I hope you, the viewer, have a very wonderful day, that you remember that I am the innocent villain. And to Oswald Cobb, remember that when that light hits the sky, it's not just a signal.
It's a warning.